Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I recently asked you guys on my Instagram if there were any specific book recommendations that you guys wanted, any tropes or settings or genres and plots, and I would give you guys personalized recommendations. I got so many responses from that. I'm thinking if this video turns out well, I will maybe do this as like a series once a month, and I can give you guys like very specific personalized book recommendations. So I have 20 books to recommend here. I'm just gonna get started going through all of these recommendations. So for female or sapphic fantasy, I would recommend Girl Serpent Thorn by Melissa Bashados. This is a YA book following this girl who was born with a curse and her touch is poisonous. And so she has always seen herself as a monster, and she finds out that there might be a way that she can break this curse. In the dungeons of her castle, there is a demon who holds the secret to her breaking this curse, and that demon is a fae woman who she has a romance with, and I loved this book so much. It is definitely underhyped. The fantasy elements in here are great. The romance is great. It blends sort of like folklore and mythology into it. The female romance in here is kind of like enemies to lovers. It's so good. The next request was a dark academia, but make it spicy. And for this one, I would recommend The Headmaster by Tiffany Rees. So this takes place at a all-boys boarding school, and the main character just got a position there as a new teacher. And when she shows up for the job, she meets the headmaster, who is this very handsome, mysterious man. And there are secrets going on in this school. I don't want to say much more because it is kind of a shorter book and it's fun to just go into it and read it, but I really loved this. It's definitely spicy and has the dark academia vibe. The next request was for a book that is set in the woods, and for this one I would recommend Silver in the Woods by Emily Tesh. This is a male romance about this centuries-old man who lives in the woods. He's kind of the caretaker to all of the wood creatures. He ends up having a little romance with a man who now owns this mansion on the edge of the woods, and it definitely has like cottagecore vibes, a little bit of like gothic, darker vibes. I loved this book so much. It's definitely a great book for like transitioning into fall as well. The next request was for a fantasy book with a family saga, and immediately the first book that came to my mind is Jade City by Fonda Lee. This is sort of like a grim, noir, martial arts inspired fantasy book that follows this rare gem called Jade. And anyone who wields Jade gets enhanced abilities. They get enhanced strength and speed and agility. And so Jade is something that is highly sought after. The production and distribution of Jade is all controlled by this one family. And so this book follows the points of views of all 4 siblings of this family who kind of play different roles in the politics of this world. And it's so great. The family aspect of this book is, I think, what makes it amazing. I love these characters and it's just fantastic. So this video is being sponsored by Scentbird. So Scentbird is a fragrance subscription that gives you the opportunity to shop from over 600 brands. It is a flexible subscription, so you can skip any months without penalties. Scentbird lets you choose a new designer fragrance every month for just $16. With each fragrance, you will get a 30-day supply so that you can try the fragrances out before committing to a full-size bottle. They carry top designer brands like Gucci, Prada, and Versace, as well as indie labels. And you can discover new fragrances by taking their quiz, and based on your preferences and the quiz answers, they will recommend you some new scents to try. So they sent me 5 different scents. All of their scents come in this little case that you just twist up to spray, and you can take the scent out to see which one it is and how much is left. And as you can see, they send you a very good size amount. So the 5 scents that they sent me are Michael Germain Sexual Noir, which has notes of vanilla, amber, pink orchid, and Jasmine. This is the one that I've been wearing like every single day. Good Habit Align, which has notes of blackcurrant, bergamot, and freesia. Deck of Scarlet, Scarlet, which has notes of sandalwood, suede, peony, and rose petals. Bella by Vince Camuto, which has notes of nectarine, jasmine, amber, and bergamot. This one is another one of my favorites. And then lastly, Sanctuary Vaquita Dolphin, which I've also been wearing this one a lot. It has notes of pear, red currant berries, water lily, sea salt, and cedarwood. And also now in September, Scentbird has expanded to Canada, and with my code RM30, you can get 30% off your first month, which is just $11, to try a brand new perfume. And thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. The next request was for female serial killers, and for this one I actually have two recommendations because I couldn't really decide, so just depending on what kind of vibe you want, I picked They Never Learn by Lane Fargo, which follows a female professor at this university who murders men on campus who are predators to women. And then I also have Jane Steele by Lindsay Faye, which is a book I don't think I talked about in a long time, but I love this book so much. It is a Jane Eyre retelling where Jane is a serial killer, and this follows her whole life from when she was a little kid to when she's in her like early 30s, I think. It's just so fantastic. It has a really great like historical gothic setting. So this one if you're in like a historical mood, this one if you're in a fast-paced thriller mood, but they're both amazing books. The next request was for a sapphic sci-fi book, and for that one I would recommend This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. This is one of my all-time favorite books, but it is definitely hit or miss. It's a very lyrical story, very abstract. I've always pitched this as Killing Eve as time-traveling pen pals, because basically this is about two time agents from altering timelines, and they are going back in time and trying to implement things in the past so that their future is the one that happens. And they're sort of like playing this cat and mouse game, trying to race each other, and through that they end up falling in love. It's such a fantastic story. The next request asked for gothic, dark, and witchy vibes, and for this one I would recommend The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. So this takes place in a fantasy village that has like puritanical cult vibes. This village is run by this man named the Prophet. He very much is like a cult leader. And outside of this village is this forest where there was a mass murder of these witches. So now their spirits are lurking in the forest wanting revenge on this town. And so at the start of the book, unbeknownst to the main character, she finds herself in that forest and accidentally unleashes the witch's curse onto the town. And yeah, this just has like the best witchy, gothic, dark vibes. Like that is exactly how I would describe this. The atmosphere in this book is amazing. And this has some of my favorite witches that I've ever read. They are dark and scary and evil, and I loved them. The next request was for a new adult brother's best friend romance, and for that one I would recommend Twisted Love by Anna Huang. This is a romance book that follows this girl, and her brother lives in the house next door to her, but he ends up going abroad for a year. So he asks his best friend Alex to stay in his house next door to his little sister to watch over her. It's very much like grumpy sunshine vibes. It has a little bit of like a darker element to it. It is very, very steamy. I love this one a lot. The next request was for underwater horror, and for this one I would recommend The Cavern by Alistair Hodge. So this takes place in Australia and follows this group of explorers who are going to explore this underwater cave that, little do they know, is home to a very, very scary monster. This book's definitely my absolute worst nightmare. It was very scary. There was a lot of action. It was very quick paced, very hard to put down. The next request is for a fantasy romance like Phoenix Unbound, and for this one I would recommend A Promise of Fire by Amanda Bochette. This is a really great fantasy romance that I don't see as many people talking about as some of the more popular ones, but this really, really reminds me of Phoenix Unbound. And so this one follows this girl who is a clairvoyant, so she can tell when anyone is lying, and that is obviously like a very sought after ability. So she is kidnapped by this warlord, and the way that he kidnaps her is he tethers himself to her with this magical rope. So they are now bound together. The rope cannot break and she cannot get away. And so the book is following them traveling back to his kingdom, and there's a lot of things that happen on the way. I really, really loved this book. I loved the magic and the angst and tension and enemies to lovers, slow burn. It was so great. The next request is for a historical romance with a great family like Bridgerton, and for this one I would recommend The Duke Heist by Erica Ridley. Only the first book is out in this series so far. The second book is coming out soon, but this series is following this sort of like ragtag family who were a bunch of children that were adopted by this billionaire, and they all sort of have like very eclectic special abilities. In the first book, they are conducting a heist of this painting, and the main character is the one that is going to steal the painting, and while she's doing that, she accidentally abducts this duke, and they end up having a romance. The second book in the series is going to be a female-female romance that I am like dying to read, but the family aspect of this book is a really big part of it, and I loved this family and all of the sort of like mischief and hijinks that they get into. The next request was for a spooky romance, and for that one I would recommend Dark House by Karina Halley. Not just specifically this book, but the whole series, because this is a slow burn romance. This follows this girl and guy who start filming a ghost hunting TV show. Every book follows a different one of their adventures. It definitely has very scary moments in here. Paranormal, ghosts, creatures, all that kind of stuff, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's super fun. I would definitely say that the first book is probably like the weakest of the series, but they keep getting better and better, and I'm just having so much fun with the series. So if you are looking for a romance with a lot of horror and spooky elements, I would definitely recommend picking up this series. The next request was for a horror slasher, and for this one I would recommend a book that I just recently read, and that is Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This follows a group of final girls who all survived their own massacres, and they have now come together to form the support group until someone discovers the group and is picking them off one by one. This was so fast-paced, so hard to put down. It was really addictive, and I had so much fun with this one. The next request was for an adult sci-fi with a little bit of romance, and for that one I would recommend The First Sister by Lyndon A. Lewis. This takes place in a future where Earth and Mars are at war, and we're following three different points of views. One of them is the first sister, who is part of this organization that is very much like Handmaid's Tale vibe. And then the other two points of views are of two soldiers who were partners until one of them deserted and the other one has now been assigned to go track their partner down and kill them. There is a romance plot in here with the first sister, and I loved it. I loved this book in general. It's one of my favorite sci-fi books. The world and these characters, and then the way that they all interconnect is so amazing. I can't remember the last time a book shocked me as much as this one did. It's fantastic. The next request is for an obscure monster romance, and so for this one I would recommend The Witch's Wolves by Ellie McGregor. This just recently came out and is sort of a Little Red Riding Hood retelling about this who was a witch, and she was exiled from her village, and so she is running in the woods and comes across this little cabin that is the home to these two wolf men hybrids. I loved this. It was super unexpected, but a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It was very sweet, very steamy. One of the softest monster romances that I've ever read. The next request is for a queer book with angst, and for this one I would recommend The Brutal Truth by Lee Winter. This is kind of inspired by Devil Wears Prada, and so it follows this girl who becomes the assistant of this very high-powered female CEO, and it follows a very slow burn relationship between them. It is so slow burn and there is so much angst, but I loved this so much. It's probably one of my favorite sapphic romances, definitely underhyped. Next request was for a captor-captive romance, and for this one I would recommend the Bad Saint trilogy by Monica James. So this follows a girl who just got married and is on her honeymoon. When she's in her hotel room, it is broken into and she is kidnapped by this group of guys, and she wakes up on a ship and is told that they're going to sell her. But then the ship crashes and her and only one of the captors survive, and they make their way to this deserted island, and they end up having to work together to survive. And I loved this trilogy. This was definitely one of the series that got me more into dark romances, and it's great. I love Monica James. The next request is for a BIPOC poly romance, and for this one I would recommend Harbor by Rebecca Weatherspoon. So this is a poly romance between 3 people. Very emotional romance. Know that going into it. It's very emotional because it deals with grief. So this follows a girl who finds out that her boyfriend was cheating on her, and the way that she finds out is because him and his mistress, the woman that he was cheating with, are shot dead in their hotel room. And so not only is she now grieving the fact that her boyfriend died, she found out that he was cheating as well. She sort of turns to the 2 men who were in a relationship with the woman that her boyfriend was cheating with, because they're sort of going through the same thing of dealing with the grief but also the heartbreak of knowing that the person that they loved was cheating on them. And so she forms a relationship with both of them, and then the 3 of them are together, and it is so great. I loved this. It is definitely one of my favorite polyamorous romances, but again, just know it is heavy. It's not a light romance. So the last request that I got is a Good for Her book, and so for this one I have 2 recommendations. One of them is the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey, which I've talked about relentlessly the past like 2 months. And so this follows a woman who was attacked when she was a teenager, and she's now spent the past decade training to get revenge on all of the guys who attacked her, and she ends up in a relationship with an FBI agent who is actually the one that is investigating all of her cases. And it's fantastic, such a great series. And then the other one that I would recommend that isn't as heavy, because that series is very heavy, very dark. So the other one is Jane Doe, and this one follows a girl whose best friend committed suicide because of an abusive relationship that she was in. And so she has now changed her identity, changed everything about herself to sort of infiltrate the life of the guy that her best friend was dating and destroy his life in order to get revenge on him pushing her best friend to commit suicide. Those are my 2 recommendations for the Good for Her vibes. So I think those are all of the recommendations that I'm going to do in this video, but again, I want to turn this into a series. Maybe once a month I will do one of these. So in the comments of this video, if you have any specific book recommendations that you're looking for, please let me know. Honestly, the more specific the better, because then I can like really pick out what book you're looking for. And next month I will come back and do another one, and we can turn this into a monthly series. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!